G'day, I am Cameron Bertuzzi and this is
Matt Fradd. G'day guys.
We are here talking about 7 tips for new Christian YouTubers. We also have some really cool mugs with bourbon in them.
Sure.
No, it's tea.
It's Russian black tea.
It's tea. Well, anyways, we're talking about, again, 7 different tips for new Christian YouTubers. I'm here actually with Matt at his new studio. So this is his new studio space. This is not actually the inside of the studio. The studio is actually right where this door is. So I'm helping him set it up, lighting and everything. And he just wanted to have me out and help set everything up. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate you.
How are you doing?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Big move to Steubenville, Ohio. Everybody who I said, we're moving to Ohio in Atlanta, they'd be like, oh, okay, Why?
Including me. I was like,
oh,
Ohio.
But I tell you, this is Catholic Mecca. You can't throw a stone without hitting a Catholic. You shouldn't. But if you were to throw a stone, you would hit a faithful Catholic. There's just so many great people here. And this studio space is awesome.
When there's also a college right up the street.
Yep,
and everything is 5 minutes away from each other. Literally 5 minutes away from each other.
Yeah.
The hotel is 3 minutes away, your house 2 minutes from that. And then this space here is just, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool town. And we were even talking yesterday how the down, right down below here,
there.
they're trying to spruce it back up because this town was it was a really booming steel.
Tell us.
Yeah, it used to have a lot to do with this in the steel industry. It was booming during that time. It was one of the top economies in the world, and then with the steel industry crashing, everything crashed here. And
so there's another guy in the room that you can't see.
What is that music?
What's happening?
Where's that music coming from?
I don't hear any music.
Anyway, keep going.
So anyways, this town that you can't see in the video was it was a booming town. So there's a really cool downtown area and everything. But since the 60s, 70s, things have really started to die down, and so people are trying to spruce it back up. It's just really cool. It'd be cool to be part of something like this. So it's really cool that you're here doing that. Well, let's get to the 7 different tips for new Christian YouTubers. So as you know, if you don't know, I run a YouTube channel called Capturing Christianity. That's what you're watching this video on. Currently, we're at 82,000 subscribers. Matt's got a YouTube channel called Pints with Aquinas, which started out as a podcast. Was it a podcast?
Yeah,
first?
just an audio podcast for the longest time.
And then you started putting it on your website, and then you moved to YouTube eventually.
Yep.
But your channel is about 105,000 subscribers?
About 105,422, not counting, but...
So we've got a little bit of experience, and so what we wanted to do was to just share some of the things that we have learned through our, it hasn't been very long that we've been involved in this, but we've learned some things and some things not to do, and so it's going to be good. So let's get into it. So the first one is very practical. This is number 1. And number 1, we're just going to talk about some thumbnail, title, and algorithm stuff that you want to be aware of. And I'll probably take point on this one.
Yeah.
Just because I've actually had the benefit of talking with other Christian YouTubers who are very, very successful, and they've shared with me these tips, and so I'm happy to share them with you as well. If you're getting into it, you're trying to get into YouTube, the whole YouTube world, and you're trying to decide what do I do with thumbnails? Do I just copy all of the content in both? One of the biggest things that I learned earlier on is that you don't want to copy the content that you put in your thumbnail in your title as well. So if you put say the title of the video is 7 tips for YouTubers, and the natural inclination might be, I'll just put that content in the thumbnail, maybe just the text all over the whole thing, and then also in the title, 7 tips for YouTubers. But actually what you want to do is split it up. You want to have different content in both. So what I think of these days is when someone is scrolling on YouTube, they're scrolling up through their app, the thumbnail is supposed to get them to stop. It's to stop the scroll, basically, to get them interested in what your video is about. So your thumbnail's got to use some really bright colors and other stuff. You've got to find some way to stop the scroll. That's what the thumbnail is for. It's not supposed to have all of this information in it. But the title, on the other hand, so once you do get them to stop the scroll, the title is supposed to draw them in and get them to click on the video itself. So it's good to have different content in both, but that should help guide you and try to determine what to put in the thumbnail, what to put in the title. Another good tip is just to look at other successful YouTubers. Doesn't have to be just Christians or apologists or whatever.
Yeah.
Just go look at somebody who's really successful.
Like here's an example of the point you just made. Joe Rogan's clips don't have any text on them. I don't think they ever have. Rather, he's got that bright green square in the middle of his thumbnail with the thing that draws your attention right into it. And so I used to do that. I used to have text and a picture. But you're the one who said that to me, and I thought that was excellent. The thumbnail stops the scroll, the text informs you about it. And so I've actually moved entirely over to kind of meme-looking thumbnails for that reason, and it certainly seems to be doing better.
Right. One of my my top video right now is my interview with Vince Lampert, and all I did was take a screen grab of the interview, and it's just like a picture of me like looking all like stupid on the other side, just like concentrating, and then on the other side it's just a picture of Vince talking in like mid-sentence. And that's the whole thumbnail, and it's at 550,000 views right now. And so you don't have to do a lot in order to like get people in and to stop the scroll. But also that interview was all about like exorcisms and stuff. So do you
think sometimes people understand that they can make free thumbnails on Canva and get super excited about making them looking super professional, and then it's almost like if you did something just a little more raw, it would actually be more appealing, more grabbing than something overly produced? Or
I think that's a good point. And you and I have probably talked about this too. It's like some of the thumbnails that you don't think are going to work, and that's kind of YouTube in general. It's kind of trial and error. So you've got to figure out, like, you just got to test and play around with stuff. I'm constantly trying out new thumbnails and seeing how they do and everything. So yeah, I mean, to your point, sometimes you can overproduce something, and like people nowadays, I think, are going away from that. Like younger people who are on the internet and watching YouTube and everything, they're not trying to watch things that look like an advertisement or look like they're really, really trying hard to grab your attention. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Sweet.
There's I could do an hour-long course on just things that I've learned about algorithms and titles and thumbnails. But I think we'll keep it there and we'll keep it moving. I don't want to keep this. I don't want the stream to go too long. All right, so that's number one. Number two is know your limits. And the verse that we've got for this is Psalm 131:1. Why don't you go ahead and read that?
It says, "My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me." So let me just point out, Aquinas actually addresses this, because I think it's in the first part of the Summa Theologiae. One of the objections to Scripture, things that philosophy can't reveal, things that have only been revealed by God, is it's too above us, and so we shouldn't concern ourselves with it because of what Psalm 131 says. And Aquinas says, well, it's precisely because it is above us that God had to reveal it to us so that we could be certain of those things. But I suppose what we mean in this context is just that it's really important to know your limits, to know what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. So if you're not like a academic philosopher, you don't need to try to pretend that you are one. Or if you're not an academic theologian, don't pretend that you are one. Just be who you are and be honest about your capabilities, because maybe we've all seen it when people have tried to give off a vibe that really wasn't authentic, and it's a bit cringeworthy. It would be way better for you and for me if you and I were just kind of honest about what we knew and what we didn't know, and then referred to perhaps an authority to kind of fill in those gaps in our knowledge.
One of my biggest pet peeves is when people like bluff some kind of answer, and you can tell that they're thinking on their feet.
I've done that.
Not really what I've done it too, and that's why it's such a big pet peeve of mine, is because I do it too. And you think part of it is because you feel sort of shameful. You feel like I should have an answer to this, right? This is a very basic question. I should know whether or not what it means for Jesus to have two natures, or like what the incarnation was about. Like, I should know that. And so you feel like the temptation is to just like kind of, you've heard some lectures, you've heard some things that people have said, and you're like, okay, I mean, I can throw something together to give somebody, but it's probably better to just be like, you know what, that's an area that I haven't done a whole lot of research into myself, and but I do know that this is a person working in this, and so that's one good thing to. I mean, you actually came up with this tip, number 2. And that you just don't want to go beyond like what you actually know. And I think that's so important.
And like, just to be a little vulnerable, I mean, my podcast is called Pints with Aquinas, and so a lot of people come looking for highfalutin theology and philosophy, and I'm not an academic. And I think in the beginning of my podcast there was a temptation to at least learn a lot so I could seem like I was. And that just got exhausting. And then I realized, people aren't coming to my YouTube channel because I'm some highfalutin philosopher or theologian. They could go to the Thomistic Institute for that or St. Paul Center for that. Apparently they're coming because maybe they relate to me and they like the discussions that I have. And so, just being yourself is the best policy, I think.
All right, let's move on to tip number 3. So tip number 3 is something that I work on daily, and that is to love those that disagree with you. And the verse that we've got for that one is 1 Peter 3:15.
Yeah.
So this is another temptation, is to you divorce yourself from the fact that you're talking to another person, as opposed to just like dealing with an argument. And a lot of us want to make that sort of separation, because then it's, I don't know, maybe it plays to our own insecurities, but also it's just like, I think it's a natural thing that we want to do, is we want to be kind of nasty, and it's that maybe that's just me.
No, it's not.
It's just, it's easier to instead of really focus on the person behind the idea and behind the argument and really love on them, that it's a really difficult thing to do, because sometimes when you encounter an idea that you find so ridiculous or so stupid or so condescending, and all you want to do is respond to that point, maybe even in the same way, it's just be like, okay, that's ridiculous, that's stupid, that's super condescending, it's very vitriolic, I don't want anything to do with that. And so that's the attitude that you then take toward the person as well. So it sort of spills over from the ideas, from the arguments, to like your attitude toward this person. And that is obviously the opposite thing that you've got to do. So 1 Peter 3:15 says, "But in your hearts reveal Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have." And this is the important part. "But do this with gentleness and respect." And I think the overall point here is just to really focus and remember the purpose that we're doing this is to love this person, instead of just like to tear down this argument, which obviously has its place, and we've got to do that. We've got to tear down bad ideas. But you've got to make this distinction between bad ideas, which you can attack, and the person themselves, which you have to love.
Completely agree. I think that's excellent. Nothing more to add.
Okay, number 4 is don't be selfish.
So let me take the lead here, because I want to say something kind about you. It can be tempting when you get a particular type of software and find just the right camera and the right lens, and you maybe have some tips as to how to make the lighting look better, to kind of keep that to yourself and not share it with those who are doing good work. And this is something that Cameron does not do. Cameron is really good at sharing the knowledge and the wisdom that he has. The only reason my studio looks as good as it does is because of Cameron's generosity. Not just now, but even back when I was in Atlanta, he'd send me the list. Like, here's the camera I use, here's the lighting I use. You don't want to do that, you want to do this instead. I have no idea how to do any of this. Cameron could have sat back and went, look, I've got the most beautiful YouTube channel on the internet among Christians, and I'm going to keep it that way, and that'll draw people to my channel, and everyone else will look inferior. I think it's amazing that you and I have spoken, and you've seen something in YouTubers, and you're like, this guy's going places and he's very gifted, and you've told me that you've reached out to them and you've helped set up their studio. I just think that's amazing, because the goal of this, of course, is
right. It's not. I don't view it as a competition, though it is in some way. Because you have these different YouTube channels that are kind of about the same thing, about apologetics or philosophy or Aquinas and Catholic doctrine or whatever, and so you have these sort of competing channels. But at the same time, the overall goal, we're not competing necessarily against each other in the long term, and like what we're actually about. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in I think some of the next tips that we've got. But that's the thing that I try to keep in mind, is like, what is the point of all of this? It's not to just have the biggest, baddest YouTube channel or have the coolest looking stuff. And there's a lot of things that we can talk about in future tips as well.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
But yeah, it's so important, I think, to look, and I actively look for new Christian YouTubers. In fact, I'm going on one on Monday who is like one of my favorite new Christian YouTubers, which I'm so pumped to promote in the next week or so. So I'm constantly looking for new people to promote their work, because I just find the work of it, like apologetics and philosophy, I find it so valuable. It needs to get out there at a much bigger level. And it's not just going to happen with one person, me or 2 other Christians. I think it's going to take a sort of army of people to really have a huge impact. And so I'm very, very happy to help it.
Before we move to the next point, I want to say something about 3 and 4. All right, 3, as we just read, was love those who disagree with you. 4 is don't be selfish. It might be more helpful just to sort of say you struggle with loving people who disagree with you and who correct you, and you are selfish. It's not a matter of just don't be selfish because it feels so easy to agree with. Of course. Yeah. Rather, it's like you are selfish, you are competitive, you don't like it when people take a bit of your piece of the pie, nor do I. What am I going to do about that now? So I think acknowledging where you are and then deciding how I want to live, because it's not always easy. I've had people call me up and ask me the sort of equipment I use, and I've felt that temptation to want to withhold that so that they don't get as big as me, and God have mercy for that. But again, I think acknowledging that part of us so that we can then do something about it is the first step.
All right, let's move on to the next tip. The next tip is it's not about clicks, it's about souls. And this kind of sums up some of the different things that we've been talking about. The temptation, once you start to get a following, I remember when I first started out, it took so long to get 100 subscribers. It took a long time to get 500. And then when I hit 1,000, I was like, oh man, things are really taking off here. And then I hooked up with some other Christian YouTubers who really helped me out, Mike Winger and John McCrae from What Do You Mean? And we did a series together. And overnight, my channel went from 1,500 subscribers to 4,000. And after you start to build some base of subscribers to your channel, the temptation, at least for me, and I know for a lot of other Christians, is to all you want to do is get to that next milestone. You want I remember thinking there was some other people that I was following and they were at 30,000 subscribers, and I was like, man, if I could just get to 30,000 subscribers,
then I'd be happy.
Then I'd be happy. Then all of this would, I would be. It was kind of I was looking for legitimacy. I wanted to feel I was doing something that was important. I guess, but that's the temptation I think that we face is we want to just grow numbers, get more views on videos. And that can really take us away, I think, from the purpose of why you started your channel in the first place and what the content is that you're trying to produce. So if you're chasing views, as opposed to chasing what God has called you to do, then you can really get off track. You might be successful at the part of you have all these views and you have all these subscribers, but you could be completely going away from what you were originally intended to do with this channel in the first place. And so that is a very, very big temptation. For a secular person, you don't really worry about that, right? It's just you're just trying to do whatever you want to do, kind of, and grow your channel in any way that you can. But for us as Christians who have a very specific goal in mind, it's very important to keep this in mind, what the purpose is of your channel.
Yeah, I guess 3 points I would make. First of all, in order for YouTube to be successful, they need to make it as addictive to the creator as it is to the consumer. And so it is an addictive thing in a way when you run your own YouTube channel because you want to see those numbers climb. So that's the first thing to kind of keep in mind, I would say. Now, the second thing is to say there's lots of ways that you could grow your YouTube channel. I could start a YouTube channel tomorrow that involved me pouring boiling hot coffee on my head in different locations of Steubenville, or maybe someone kicking me in the stomach and me throwing up. Yeah, that would get a lot of views. And people might think it's stupid and they would subscribe, but it's well, that's not what I want, obviously. So what do I want? And so one thing I really want to try to keep in mind is where do I want people's attention to be? Not where is it, but where should it be? And I've fallen into this in the past where I've done some things that I think really were outside of my lane, things on politics, things on free speech, and I think it's important that these things are addressed, absolutely. But if I was to reflect upon why I was doing it, I think some of it was definitely this is what people are talking about right now. I need to address this right now. But I don't want to work like that. I want to direct people's attention to the sacred scriptures, to the church, to what Thomas Aquinas had to say. And if I get half as many views as I could have got doing something else, I want to be okay with that. Because at the end of the day, this is about saving souls. There are people who can, you and I are part of that, who can spend all eternity in hell. And I really want to lead people into a relationship with Jesus Christ, extolling the scriptures, interviewing people who can help explain them and things like that, so that they can live a deep and meaningful relationship with Jesus Christ.
Amen. All right, number 6, we've got 2 more, and then I've also got a bonus tip. So number 6 is to be yourself. And what was funny is that we were like, who's like the most famous person that said this? And I don't think it's actually Jesus.
Yeah, we're like, if Jesus said, be yourself, everybody else is taken, I'd be like, this is very disappointing. I don't know what to do with this. But it's true. Like, it's true.
Well, it's true because I think in a world on YouTube where there's, thousands and thousands and thousands of different creators, you've got to find a way to like differentiate yourself from everyone else. So you've got to find someone, and the best way to do that, the easiest way, and the way that you should do that is to really focus on who you are and what you sort of bring to the table. So I remember when I was starting out my channel, or actually it wasn't a channel at that point, it was just a blog that I was considering starting and just jotting down my thoughts, practicing writing and that kind of thing. And I was like, I thought initially, I was like, being a photographer, that's my background. Being a photographer it doesn't really lend to my legitimacy at all as like a thinker, right? And so I was like, do I even want to marry photography and does that even make any sense? And eventually I was like, look, that is who I am. My background's in photography. I have a passion for that as well. So why not? Why not try to marry the two? And then I also realized that no one else was doing that. There are no other. I mean, I know of, I think, one person who is kind of doing something along those lines, but it hasn't really been done on a level that, we're doing it right now on this YouTube channel. So, and I could have easily tried to pretend like I was someone else, or like it was just, just some random person doing it. So I think it's really important, and it helps differentiate my channel and the content that I produce from everyone else. And that's another reason why I'm so happy to just share my stuff with everyone, because I know that, my background in photography, I know that even if I share all of this stuff, all of the same equipment, the same lighting,
mine will
the
still
same
be
everything,
better.
mine is still going to look different because that's just who I am, my background and everything. So it's just, I think it's really important. If you want to find what you've got to find a way to differentiate yourself from everyone else. Otherwise, like, why is anyone going to watch your channel as opposed to anyone else? Because you're just producing the same kind of content. You've got to find a way to be different.
One quick thing I would say is when I started speaking around the country, different Catholic schools and Catholic conferences and things like that, somebody said the best piece of advice I ever got was, don't go up there and try to sound like Scott Hahn or Jason Everett or Christopher West. Just go up there and be big, dorky you. And it was actually really helpful because it is tempting. Like, you and I have heard people speak and it's really convicted us, and so we naturally start imitating that, but it comes off insincere. The world doesn't need another Scott Hahn. Actually, maybe they do. The world doesn't need another Matt Fradd, for goodness sake. So, you don't need to try and sound like me. You can just be you. And
that's a big temptation, I think, for this is to get a little bit more specific. So if you're into apologetics or philosophy and you've been interested in doing a debate yourself, a big temptation is just to like kind of copy everything that William Lane Craig does because he's so good at debate. It's ridiculous. Now, of course, that's not to say that you don't want to copy anything from him. It's good to take the important bits, like you probably want to be really prepared when you go into a debate and that sort of thing, but you don't want to be a mini William Lane Craig because there's already a William Lane Craig and he's already doing his own thing. Yeah. And God has put certain things on the inside of you that he wants to pull out as well in a different way. And so you've got to really, again, you've got to be yourself. I think that's really important. Okay, so this number 7, and this one is really, really good.
Yeah.
This is a really, really good point, and this was actually brought up by Matt, of course, when we were planning all of this. So I'll let you read it.
Listen to the opinions of people you trust and not to the opinions of random people on the internet. I remember, when I started doing YouTube, I hadn't really been on YouTube a lot. I didn't read the comment section, but when everyone starts getting criticism and things like that, one thing people say to me a lot is, dude, you look tired. You need to sleep. And I'm like, this is how my face looks. I'm well rested, you bastard. But then other things have got a more substantive, where they'll critique something you said or say things like this. And on the other hand, you've got people praising you for doing certain things. And it's not necessarily wise to follow the opinions of random commenters, no offense, in the YouTube comment section, whether it's good or bad. I think what you need are wise people around you who understand your mission and want to help direct you, and say to them, would you give me some feedback? How do you think this went? Those are the people to listen to. Because I could do a video and get a ton of criticism because people said whatever, but then I've got people who I know and trust in my life, who know my mission and know what I'm trying to accomplish, who say, actually, Matt, that was the best thing you've done. That's who I need to listen to. Likewise, someone could be very praiseworthy and say it's fantastic that you stood up and you stuck it to the man, whatever. Whereas I've got people in my life who might say, you know what, this is not what your channel was supposed to be about, right? So I think, yeah, got a lot of clicks, but don't look at that as success. You need to maybe get back on track. And I've had people in my life do that, and I've been really grateful for it.
That is so good. So good. When you start to get a bigger YouTube channel, bigger following, and it doesn't really, you don't have to have a lot of subscribers in order for this to happen, in order to start getting a lot of contents on your videos, or comments on your videos, especially if you're talking about something that's really controversial, like religion or like politics. So I remember early on, I was getting these comments about like my lighting setup, and they were like, your lighting setup, bro, it's too dramatic. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I got comments like that, and I was like, you know what, maybe they're right. Maybe I need to like change it up a little bit. And then I was talking to someone else, and he's like, bro, just do you.
Yeah.
Like, like your brand, whatever you like, the kind of lighting and everything that you like, that's what you need to do. Don't listen to this like random person in the comments section. And so I just thought this was such a good point. Listen to the people in your life that are mentors or people that you really trust. Listen to their opinions rather than to the opinions of just random people on the internet that are going to actually touch it and kind of like fiddle with some of your insecurities. So I think that's so important. All right, so here's the last tip. The last tip is the bonus tip. So in the a link in the description of this video is a link to my Patreon page. It's a public post, but it's got all of the equipment that I suggest that you pick up if you're wanting to get into YouTube, into the whole YouTube world. So I've got two different lists. I've got a sort of a budget list, which has a little Logitech Brio camera, which is a webcam. It's got a microphone, which I think is about $100. And then the software that I suggest is free. It's called OBS Streamlabs. And that is linked in the description of this video. Takes you to my Patreon page, but the Patreon, the link itself is public, so anyone can access it. And so that's the budget list that I suggest. And then like the list that I've got and that I use, I've also got that listed below there as well. And so that one is a whole lot more detailed. If you want to take it to the next level, you've got to spend some more, you've got to invest a lot more money into a nicer setup and everything. But if you're interested, because I get this question all the time, Cameron, what do you use? What kind of camera do you use? What kind of lens do you use? What kind of camera do you suggest? I'm on a budget. What kind of thing can I do for my YouTube channel that it's not going to break the bank? And so I went ahead and I created that list for you guys in case you wanted to go and just see what it is. So the software that I started out using for streaming was OBS. And OBS didn't have the Streamlabs version. I don't even know if you're familiar with OBS.
You told me about it just as Ecamm was coming in.
Ecamm, yeah. So I eventually switched to Ecamm, which is also in the Patreon link that I've got in the video. But OBS is free software. Anybody can use it. It's open source. It's also the Streamlabs version. It looks a little bit nicer. And you've also got some really cool plugins and stuff that you can use. It's not very intuitive, I'll say that. So you've got to do a whole lot of work on the front end trying to figure out how all of this software works and streaming and bitrate and all this kind of stuff. It's like there's a lot of stuff you've got to learn. Really big learning curve. Something like Ecamm, you've got to pay monthly for, but it's also a whole lot more easier. It's intuitive. The thing with Ecamm though is that it's just for Mac users. So if you're on a Mac computer or Apple, then you can use that software. But if you're not, OBS Streamlabs is available to you, and there's some other options. I just don't have any personal familiarity with them because I don't use Windows Computer. And I even, when I was upgrading to 4K, streaming in 4K, I was looking at different options for computers, and I eventually landed with Mac. Mac was still made the most sense for me to do live streaming. But anyway, so yeah, if you're interested in some equipment, that's a bonus tip. You can head to that link on Patreon and get all of the stuff that you need. So is there anything else that we...
No, that's great. I hope that was a help.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
I thought you were going to shake my hand. You clearly weren't. That's weird.
Well, thanks for inviting me out to your studio. This is really
Thanks
cool.
for coming.
We're actually about to do a video on Matt's YouTube channel in, say, an hour and a half?
Yeah, hour and a half.
So we're going to be in the studio itself, though. So it's not going to look like this at all. It's going to look a whole lot nicer. But I'm really excited.
Me too.
It's going to be really cool.
Thanks so much.
All right. Well, actually, I don't have my hands on the end live stream yet, so.
Thanks so much. You tell me when it's on there.
All right, we're on now. All right, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you later.